All right. Hey, everybody. We're here with Tim Puttock from Prince. Hey, Tim, how are you?
Hey, Mitch, how you doing?
Thanks for being here with us today, chatting about some product and all the fun stuff that you guys have on deck.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Like, probably my favorite thing to do is talk about tennis and about products. So
So, yeah,
happy to be here.
and we were obviously, we can let everybody know we were just chatting for, what is it, about a half hour, just about,
Yeah,
about product before we even started recording,
no, we could probably do that all afternoon.
all afternoon. So to get started, and I was in touch with Tyler last week and some of your other buddies in the business, and kind of just going over talking about your personal experience in the industry and your personal experience kind of growing up as a tennis player. So can
Yeah,
you tell us a little bit about yourself?
yeah. Obviously, my experience is going to be a little different to those guys. Obviously, I'm British, so I grew up in England, and I probably started playing tennis when I was about 5 or 6 years old. We actually moved to a small town, like in the middle of England. And from my bedroom window, I could see a little tennis court. We had a one court tennis club, and I could spy it out my window. And ever since then, I was pestering my parents to get out and play. And neither of them were tennis players. They hadn't played tennis really since school. But I was itching to go out there. And at that time, it wasn't really normal for 5-year-old kids in England to be playing tennis. They didn't really have any classes for that age back then. It was kind of, oh, you got to be older to come and play in the group sessions that were going on. So one of my uncles actually bought me a little tennis racket, a Techno Pro. It was like a little aluminum frame, and took me out on the court, and I loved it. And from that moment, I was always involved. I went through all of the junior sessions with the club, and then I started playing county tennis, which is I guess similar to your state level tennis over here. Represented the county versus other counties around the country. And started coaching myself. I was doing lots of things with the tennis club. So I was actually started out probably when I was in high school, and I was going and assisting the tennis coach at our local club, and then I got my first stringing machine. So I was doing all the stringing for the clubs. This is a familiar story. It's like how a lot of us started, in the industry. String. I had my drop weight stringing machine and was stringing for the club, and that was keeping me going through high school, just between coaching and stringing. So yeah, it's obviously a little different. And I didn't go through any of the college system like other people do over here. That sort of doesn't really exist the same way in the UK. But I played at university. It's obviously a very different thing. And then that was really my upbringing in tennis.
And how did you get into the industry after college?
So actually, I got into the industry before I left college. So I went to university to do mechanical engineering or sports engineering. And in my third year, I did an internship, an international internship. So I actually went over to Taiwan, and I worked with a polymer injection company for outsoles for like track shoes and soccer cleats and things. So I was already doing stuff over there, and then I went to Vietnam for a further 4 months, and I was working like at the factory every day, seeing how the product was made, both shoes and certain components for bags and things. And then when I came back to university for my fourth year, before I did my masters, I actually went and did a summer internship in London with the International Tennis Federation. So I was working in the technical department there through the summer, and that's actually how I got in touch with Prince. So when I finished my master's degree in engineering, I was looking for a job, and the head of the technical department at the International Tennis Federation sent me a message saying, "Hey Tim, there's a job opening at Prince. Would you be interested?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." This was a couple of months before I finished my master's, so it was like in the April time. And they were like, they're looking to interview a potential entry-level engineer. It's in Italy. And I was like, okay, I don't speak any Italian or anything like that. So I contacted them and they were like, yeah, do you want to do an interview? And I was expecting, it'd be on the phone. They're like, no, come on, fly out to Venice. I was like, sure, I flew to Venice. I remember staying in a hotel sort of in the middle of nowhere, actually, between Venice and Treviso, which is a small town about 30 minutes away from Venice. And the office was located in a really small town. It was actually, by the time I got there, we had a small office which was above a car dealership. And we actually had part of the ground floor as well, which is where all the lab was. So they picked me up in this little hotel, and from this little hotel, they drove me to the office. They sat me in this room, and then in walks, like, I was there in my suit with my tie, expecting it to be like a really one thing. And then in walks like 6 Italian guys. They sat down at the table and they just started firing questions at me. I was like, okay, this is kind of intense. But anyway, they offered me the job on the spot before I left for the day. Roberto, who was running the office, said never come back in the tie. And that was it. And then in the afternoon after the interview, I went into Venice. I was like sailing down, on the boat down the canal, thinking, did that really just happen? Was I really just in an interview room with a bunch of Italian guys talking about rackets? And they wanted to know about my background in tennis. And obviously part of my master's degree was actually a project I was doing on, it was a finite element analysis of a racket and ball impact, and how that was the effects on the racket and the ball. And it was quite a simple model at that time, because finite element wasn't really big like it is now in engineering. But obviously it was something that I sat down and talked to them about, and they got excited about, which really led me to the Prince job.
That's
So yeah, it was
that's a great story.
and it's crazy because I actually flew out the day after my graduation ceremony. My graduation ceremony was on the 4th of July. I flew out on the 5th, and I started that day.
Wow.
So it was wild. It was
That's
a
awesome.
real eye opener, and I was just like, yeah, I'm just gonna pack up and go for it.
So that's where you started with Prince.
That's where I started. Yep.
Tell us where you are now. What's your title, and what are your primary roles?
So now I'm the senior director of R&D. Obviously it sounds like that was quite an adventure. That's not really where my travels stopped by any means. I spent 4 years in Italy, working with a really great R&D team there. We had 7 engineers at that time, and it was 2006, so it wasn't that long after 03 had really started to take off. And you can probably ask Tyler about it, but the engineering team over there, we got a little carried away with some of the technologies we were building at that time. If you remember, I don't know if you remember the old XO3 with the energy bridge, the inserts,
Mhm.
like on the what was the Premiere back then. Yeah, those we built some originally that were full carbon. We made them with carbon, and we would actually go to the factory, and we had to teach them how to like lay up these, like, it looked like a carbon worm, and we built it around a tool with all these. It was crazy. It was like a work of art rather than a tennis racket. We maybe got a little bit away from the end consumer at that point, but we were really in the weeds with some of the technologies we were building. And we go back now and look at some of the developments we were doing back then, and we're like, we're crazy. We were spending so much money on developing, but it was a really interesting time to be in that office, because those guys were really, really great engineers, and I learned an awful lot from them, and then also from being in China. Obviously, after being in Italy, I moved to China for around 4 years as well, and I spent a lot of time at the factories, seeing how all of the production and development was done over there. And it was a crazy time, because it was after the financial crisis, and so we built these 03 rackets, and most people don't really know how they were made, but they were super complicated tools. We had all these, I think there were about 17 different plates on this tool, and everything was hand built. It was all put in piece by piece. Sorry, my 6-year-old's just walked in. Everything was put in piece by piece, and it was so complicated. And so that was when they decided to move me over to China to really try to find some ways to make the process more efficient and try to improve both the tooling and the process. And then from there, I moved to Florida. So I was down in Florida with a really cool team. That was such a fun time down there. And now up to New York. So I'm at the head office in New York. It's been wild.
Yeah. So, and that's when we met, when you were down in Florida.
That's right.
And had some fun times at IMG, stringing at the Eddie Her, and
that's right.
That was a good crew. No question.
It was very good.
So I'm gonna ask you the tough question, and the one that Tyler answered so spectacularly, which is, through all of this, and I think I've got a sense of it, but through all of this and all of your experience in the industry, what keeps you motivated?
It's a good question. I think what keeps me motivated is, is tennis players and always trying to find a way to make the game of tennis fun. We were talking a little bit before we jumped on this call about some of the new technologies and some of the new developments we're working on. And as I was saying to you, we're really looking at ways to find a unique feel of a racket, a unique sensation, so that when players go and play, they're really enjoying the game of tennis to the maximum. So, obviously being in R&D, I'm always looking at new rackets, new technologies, new strings, new whatever. So I'm on that cutting edge of it. So it's always exciting for me because there's always something new, and there's always ways to try to improve the performance of a product. And when you improve the performance of a product, it improves everybody's enjoyment of the game. So that's really why we all stay motivated. I think, I might not have the line that Tyler managed to pull off, but it's true. It's, we're all in it for the game of tennis. We love the game of tennis. That's why we're here and doing it still.
I think that's one of the things that really stands out to me, in knowing you guys for these years. It's the level of care that you have for the game, and the level of love you have for the game is it's infectious.
Sure, you don't go through everything that we've been through over the last 15 years if you don't love it. So that's for sure.
So thinking about a little bit about kind of what you're talking about, and obviously you being an engineer, what do you think has been more important in the industry, the design element or the materials story? Obviously they're related in a way, but
yeah, that's really chicken and the egg kind of conversation.
Yeah, right.
One of the major things that's carbon fiber tennis rackets have been around for 30 years plus, and the smaller head sizes were really common until there were some pretty big changes, in head size, in cross section, thickness. But probably the biggest single change to tennis has actually been the introduction of polyester strings. And I would say that material change alone has changed the game of tennis, the way people play. The baseline game, aggressive spin, has all come about from the introduction of polyester strings, because it just allows players to really take bigger cuts of the ball and generate more spin. And that has, while racket materials haven't really changed a whole lot in the last 20 years, the way that we build the rackets to account for that new string material has changed. Because obviously, if we built rackets that were still 350 grams and 72 RA stiffness, and we were playing with polyester strings, nobody would be playing tennis anymore because everybody's arms would be falling off. So yeah, that change in string will just really change the way we build rackets. And you know, we've seen in the industry there was a period where rackets were getting pretty stiff again, and that's because of the angles, the big cuts that players were taking at the ball, and just to have that torsional stiffness in the frame to stop you just the ball flying off or you just losing everything when you're taking that cut. But I think we're starting to see now that stiffnesses are starting to come down. I'd like to say we've led that. We have had softer rackets in the line for quite a long time, but I think it's becoming more and more of a trend.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty obvious trend because basically there was nowhere else to go. When you go as stiff as possible, and then you got to back down at some point. But I do have to agree with you, being someone who's pretty familiar with a lot of different manufacturers' lines. I always felt that the Prince rackets offered a level of flexibility that you just didn't see across the other brands.
Yeah.
So yeah, you guys were there first. So thinking about some of this stuff, and you and I were talking a little bit about this before, and we, again, like we said, we could probably talk about it forever. Let's start talking about actual gear.
Okay.
And want to know all-time favorite equipment. So again, and that's the thing, like we kind of limited this a little bit to rackets and whatnot, but let's expand this since we're talking to the engineer here. Let's go favorite racket of all time, favorite string of all time, favorite grip of all time, maybe favorite shoe of all time. And then also what's your favorite for like your current line too?
Yeah. Okay.
That's a lot.
Interesting. That's tough. There's been a lot of good product. Probably my favorite racket of all time. Ooh. Probably the one that I played when I was growing up as a junior. So I played the Head Radical. So I really had a great time with that.
Now, which version did you play with?
The Zebra.
The Zebra,
yeah. So favorite string is tough. Like, favorite string in terms of playability or what I think it's its industry, because I would go, honestly, I would go Singer. I think Singer is one of the most underrated strings ever. Like every time I go out and play with it, I'm like, why are more people not playing with Singer? Like it's actually a string more people should use. So I know we just talked about how polyester changed the industry, and obviously there's a lot of good polyesters that we could talk about, but I think I'd go Singer. I just think it's just a fun string to play with, and more people should be using it.
I'll accept that answer.
And then for grip, I like a leather grip. I do. Unfortunately, I tend to, being a Brit, once when I was down in Florida and it got a little sweaty down there, having a dry over grip, tournament grip was good. We had a version of it, obviously, and actually the Grip Plus, using the old Prince Grip Plus, the lotion that you put on your hand, like when I was down in Florida, I almost couldn't play without it. So I would say that was a different kind of a product that was out there that was really became essential to my game. And then now in the current line, my favorite.
Don't forget shoes.
Oh, shoes.
Because we talked to Dennis a couple weeks ago, and obviously.
Yeah, well, Dennis is the shoe guy, so I don't know that I could pick a favorite shoe.
You remember? So I played with Prince stuff from the time I was a kid. Do you remember the Aero types that the NFS
The
Aerotech.
NFS, yeah,
I love those shoes in high school. It
yeah.
was amazing in the 90s.
I mean, I've been playing in versions of the T22 for the last 10 years, so I'm pretty familiar with that. Would I say it's my favorite shoe ever? No, but I'm pretty familiar playing in that shoe. So, and then current line.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna talk rackets. Current line. So my favorite racket right now is the Phantom 100X 1820. As I was explaining to you a little earlier, I tend to get a little flat and slappy with my tennis these days. My footwork's a little light, but it just allows me to take big swings at the ball, and just every shot feels solid. It's to me, it's a really fun racket to play with. People would think that it was kind of demanding being a heavier racket and an 1820, but it's really not. It's actually pretty forgiving all over the racket. You can generate plenty of power with it because it's a little thicker than our old Phantom frame. It's just a fun racket to play with.
Nice. Oh, so that's for me, like I could talk about that stuff for forever. I love that stuff. Um, Thinking about some of your other favorites though. So let's go into favorite tournament. As a fan,
Favorite tournament.
as an industry person, as a fan, however you want to answer that.
It's pretty easy for me, to be honest. It's a pretty easy question. So favorite tournament by far is Wimbledon. So obviously, being a Brit, it's our home tournament. And my first trip to Wimbledon was in 1991. And I was there for Agassi's very first match at Wimbledon when he came out in the full white. I was there on centre court for his first match. So that was a pretty major moment for me. And then every time I go to Wimbledon, and I've been a lot. I was fortunate, as I said earlier, to spend some time at the ITF, and we got to go to the tournament every evening. I had the pass; I could go in and go around the grounds. It's very different to like the US Open, where the US Open is quite open, and you get to see a lot of tennis on the outside courts. It's probably better from a spectator point of view in that sense. But Wimbledon, there's something about the atmosphere when you go in, and you just like all the hairs on the back of your arm just stand up. For me, I think there's something as well to be said about the way you even get tickets. It's like, instead of, you can't go online and buy tickets, you're in like a lottery for the tickets, and you apply for it, and it's luck of the draw which day you get, if you even get tickets. And then if you don't, you can go and line up and camp outside in the line there. And I did that a couple of times when I got older with my brother, and we'd go and take our little tent down, and we'd camp out on the park there and in the line and line up, and you meet all these people as you're waiting just to get in. And it's hard to explain the atmosphere around that, and being on centre court. You go on the grandstand court at US Open, and while it's enormous, like the Arthur Ashe, it's enormous, but it's like it doesn't hold up in terms of the atmosphere compared to Wimbledon.
Awesome. What again, going on this theme of favorites, do you have any favorite people that you've had the chance to work with? Again, from coaches to people in the industry to players.
Yeah. So again, I was very fortunate to start with Prince at an exciting time as an engineer. So that group of guys down there in Italy, the engineers that I learned so much from them. And then, the team over in Taiwan and China as well. Obviously, I spent a lot of time over in Asia at the factories, and Robert and the team in Taiwan, and a former colleague of mine over there, Vincent, who was an engineer as well. He did a lot of stuff on the layup development and quality control and a lot of process stuff. And I learned a huge amount from him. Every trip I went over there, I learned something that I didn't know before, and it was crazy. And then in more recent times, obviously working with Tyler and Dennis and Ramon, that group of people, obviously they're like family to me. So it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure working with them over the last few years. And unfortunately, Dennis is over with Head now, but we had a great little run there where we were working side by side, developing some what we think was pretty spectacular products. And each one of those has a special place in the history of my time with Prince.
So thinking about your dream team time there, what
dream team?
What were some of your favorite products that came out of that time?
I have a few. One of the ones that I would say we were pretty proud of was the Beast 98. It was actually one of the last ones that I worked on with Dennis. I think finding that sort of perfect balance between control and power. I think it's a really underappreciated racket. I don't know that many people gravitated towards it and picked it up, but there's just this sensation when you hit with that racket that was really good. Quite a lot of the Techstream rackets that we did during that period, I think, we managed to soften up the frame in a way, but still have enough juice, enough power, and that that impact sensation that we were really looking for, and that came through a lot of testing. The first rounds of Techstream rackets we did, I was actually living over in China at that time, and I was at the factory every day, and we did some combinations where we used such a huge amount of Techstream that the rackets became so rigid and just unbelievably powerful, but the feel wasn't there. And we found out pretty early on that adding Techstream in the shaft was really stiffening up the torsional stiffness, and it was changing the trajectory of the racket. So we actually then had to soften the hoop and adjust the way that we did the string spacing, and all of those small details that we did while we were developing that. Then you see that through all the Techstream models that we built together as a team. So I'd say all of those, and then really, the pinnacle of it is the Phantom line. That was a line of rackets that I remember the day very clearly. We were sat in the office in Florida, and there was just me and Tyler there that day for some reason. I think the other guys were out doing a clinic at ING or something, and we were laying out the rackets, like which rackets in our line are the most important. How's this line look? And we're like, it feels like something's missing. Like, where's that iconic, thin beam, round head shape players racket that Prince has been synonymous with, from the graphites to the all the way through, even the 03 tours. That was something that we built our legacy on, at least in terms of the pro players, and that was missing from our line. So we had the conversation, well, where can we take Techstream? We'd already had some success with the Techstream material, and we're like, well, let's do this thin beam racket. But my argument was, let's go even further than where we've been with, let's not do the 19 millimeter straight beam racket that we did with the graphite that everybody's expecting. Why don't we do CTS, but do it like a really thin CTS? We go from 20 millimeters in the tip all the way down to 16 and handle. And I remember Tyler looking at me like, no, you're crazy. Like, you're crazy. It's not going to work. Like, it's too thin. I'm like, we've seen what Techstream does. We know we can make the racket soft, but still, we've figured out how to do the layups using that material and using other things and using the construction. Apologies. We're seeing what it can do and how we can build those frames. We know how to build that frame. So we did. I did a 3D drawing. We prototyped it. I still have the 3D printed version in our warehouse. You know, we all picked it up and were like, this looks crazy. Very first one, I was like, yeah, but I bet you we can build it. So we did. We built the mold. We all hit it, and it was just like, whoa, this is wild. I think that for the first time we built it, we actually did a 27 and a quarter version of the Phantom Pro 100p, the box beam version. And when we hit that, it was just like it was a wow moment. Like, and we get them every now and then, like the first racket out of the bag that we hit, and it was just the sensation hitting it, because we were all expecting it to be a limp noodle and sort of not go anywhere, and we'd need to like dial it up. But that first one, it was like, okay, it's flexible, obviously, but it had juice. It had a comfort that obviously we'd learned from the previous rackets we'd done, but to get to that, and then now what the Phantom line is with, you know, we've built it out into, I think we have, you know, 8 or 9 rackets in the Phantom line now, from what was 3, but we only launched with 1. We started with 3 rackets, and we now have, you know, 8 or 9. Is kind of crazy, and it's just built up from people playing it and telling other people about it, and that sort of, you know, spread from players as opposed to, you know, we really did a huge marketing push on it. I think that gives us a satisfaction, because that means that we're doing something right. If players are playing it and they're telling other, oh, you should go try it because it's just a really fun racket to try, that's when I'm like, yeah, we've done something right.
So thinking about that and listening to that story, it sounds like you kind of had your design element in mind, and then you said, well, now I know that we have the material that will allow for this particular design. So
yeah, I mean, I think, you know, it really started with, you know, where we wanted the performance of the racket to be, that playability that we were missing from the line, because obviously, you know, when we started with the Techstream line, we had the what was the Warrior rackets and the Tour rackets, and we had a Premier 120. But even the Tour rackets, it was a more oval head shape. It was a slightly thicker cross section. It was closer to a tweener racket than a true player's racket, and certainly a player's racket in what we imagine a player's racket is at Prince. You know, the graphites and the Diablos and the Michael Chang racket, and, you know, those types of rackets, were really missing that thin beam round head, the softer, the comfort that you get on that type of comfort and control from the baseline. We were missing that from the line, and that's what we were really going for. And we knew how to get there with the materials that we had and the lessons that we'd learned through building those rackets in the Techstream line. Because remember, before that, we'd really been an O3 brand for quite a long time. There'd been a few. We did the pro rackets. There'd been a few traditional construction rackets, but we'd been out of that for quite a long time. And now we're focused with the Techstream line only on traditional construction rackets to begin with. So we learned a lot of lessons doing that, which then helped us with the Phantom line.
So obviously the whole process is very cumulative, you know, in terms of, you know, taking previous lines, and I think, you know, arguably that's kind of the way everything works. But when we're thinking about the process of design, if you were to build a new product starting today, could you walk us through what the process, maybe not the particulars of the individual product itself, but the process overall, how you would address it?
Yeah. So obviously for us now, you know, as I was saying before, when we were in Italy, it was done differently, because we'd really start from an engineering perspective, and we're trying to build, you know, unbelievable technologies and really push the envelope with technology. I think, you know, what we've learned is that the first thing has to be the playability and the end target, the consumer. Who's going to play with that racket? Why do they want what are they looking for in a racket, and why would they buy that racket? And so that's where we really start. We figure out what that performance needs to be. Then we'll brainstorm some concepts of how we think we can get there. So, you know, what the shape of the racket is going to be, what technologies we can build into it to try to get to that end performance. I'll then go and start noodling on my CAD station and doing some drawings. And it'll normally be me making 10, 12 different, frame shapes that to most people look exactly the same, but to me look totally different. And that would just be, me tweaking certain things with, the spacing in the top of the racket or the bottom of the racket, the way the frame transitions from the hoop to the handle. All of those are really built in from the beginning. The cross sections, I'll try different shapes, different cross sections. Obviously, we know how certain sections are gonna bend and react in different parts of the frame. That comes from working on rackets for 15 years. So a lot of it is our knowledge and intuition. Then from there, we'll go and I'll set a specification for the rackets. It needs to be, this weight, stiffness, balance. I'll work with the factories on a layup design, and that's really it's like the recipe of the materials in the frame, and it's different stiffnesses of carbon, angles, normally with the same resin system throughout, but it's really the length of the strip, the width of the strip, the amount of fiber and the angles of the fiber, and we'll build that sort of jigsaw. We might want to stiffen a certain part of the frame to get a certain reaction, or soften a certain part of the frame. We're looking at the way it twists, the way the hoop flexes. All of those things are built into that recipe. And normally now we can get 85-90% of the way there. Obviously, if it's a really radical geometry, and every now and then we try and throw one of those in there to try something a bit different. It takes us a few more goes, but we're pretty good at nailing down the layup, the construction, the shape of the frame based on how we want it to play. And one of the things, as I was saying before, one of the things that we really learn on TechStream is it's not even really about string pattern as opposed to string spacing. One of the things that maybe frustrates me most in the tennis industry is everybody has this mindset of a racket needs to be 300 grams, it needs to be 100 square inches, it needs to be 1619, and they'll go and look for that when they're not really thinking about what the end performance that they want to get out of the racket is. And we can build a string pattern that's 1618 or 1620 that plays almost identical to you would get from a 1619, depending on the spacing and how far those extreme strings are from the edges of the frames, how dense it is in the middle, how dense it is on the edges. That can completely change the way that the whole string bed flexes. And you can string a racket in a different way, but same tensions, you can string it in a different way, and the performance is different. It feels different, and it's the same. It's like one 1619 is not the same as another 1619. So saying that, oh, it needs to be a 1619, I'm like, really? Because I feel like we can change things on the way the frame flexes, and we can change things on the spacing of the string to give such completely different playing 100 square inch 1619 rackets that it's sort of, why don't you go try something different? Maybe some of these companies are building rackets out there that aren't as well understood, but maybe if you go and hit it, you'll get a completely different sensation, and maybe that will change people's mindsets. But I think the trends of, I've got to buy 100 square inch, I've got to buy a 1619, I've got to buy this weight, that's really where my biggest frustrations are with the industry, particularly as an engineer, because we want to do different things. We want to push the boundaries a little more than that.
Yeah, it's interesting, Tim, listening to your, discussing that process. It sounds like there are just so many variables that it's easier to get it wrong than it is to get it right when you're looking at geometry, when you're looking at material and layup and whatnot. And it almost sounds like a guy like you is just so skilled at pulling the right snowflake out of the air. There's a certain magic to that.
I think the reality is, Mitch, that it's it's sort of hard to get it really wrong. There aren't that many bad rackets out there. You know, we're working within certain parameters that if you get the overall stiffness right, you know, if you get the overall stiffness right and you get the overall weight and balance right, you can get 75% of the way there. But it's then finding those tweaks in, you know, in torsional stiffness, in different zone stiffnesses, in the twitch stiffness, like the way the hoop flexes in this way, in spacings, in different materials in different locations. That's where you're getting to that extra 25%. And that's where you can have two rackets that are effectively the same, but that look the same on paper, but play totally different.
So I just was visited by my 5-year-old.
My 6-year-old is here too, so
we both had visits.
Yeah,
that's the state of the things right now.
Yeah, welcome to isolation.
So obviously we touched a little bit on kind of what frustrates you about the industry. Where do you see things going down the road in terms of, do you see the industry making strides in positive directions, or do you feel like we're kind of stuck on the same loop?
Yeah, I think that it's already started making strides in the right direction. I think it's, you know, brands have already started moving away from 100 square inches and really stiff. Like that stiffness trend has already started shifting. You know, there's plenty of product out there that from some of the small brands like your Dunlops or Prince or even Yonex, there's different playabilities out there that people can try. I think, you know, the other brands, Wilson, the Clash, I mean, it's not what people are expecting from a racket, but it doesn't mean that it wasn't a good racket. People enjoyed playing with it. It had a more unique sensation, and I think that's something that brands are going to start moving towards. What the future holds, I mean, who knows, because of the environment that we're in right now, how rackets are going to be sold, how, you know, how tennis is even going to be played in groups and whatever. I think people are going to find that maybe there's more purchasing through online, more demos that way, more done at the club with coaches, and maybe that's a way that we can get some different mindsets. But it's I don't know, it's a really hard one. It's a really hard one to say how the future's gonna be of the tennis industry, let alone of product.
I mean, this question is pretty out there, but, you know, again, just listening to your response there, what do you think there's going to be an impact from this coronavirus pandemic in terms of how we play? I've been on a couple of calls recently about, you know, how we're going to allow tennis to be played, and it looks like our entry level back to the game is going to be a lot of singles.
Yeah.
So, you know, and recreationally, tennis doubles is the more popular game. So,
Sure.
You know, do you think we're going to see some of that trickle into equipment sales because people are playing a different game?
I mean, it is a different game, and I hope it doesn't all go to singles, because I think everybody loves playing doubles and everybody loves playing team tennis. It's such a fun way to participate in tennis. And the same with, like, you know, tennis lessons. You're on court with a group of people as opposed to individual one-on-one lessons. Yeah, it's great to have a one-on-one tennis lesson, but there's something fun about being in group sessions. And I think, you know, I really hope it doesn't shift away from that, you know, team participation, you know, group coaching sessions, because I think that's the beauty of tennis. And that's why tennis boomed in the 70s and 80s, because people would go to tennis clubs and it was a social thing. If that social side of tennis goes away, then, you know, I think it would be a real shame. I mean, obviously, if everybody's playing singles, then there might be a shift in the type of rackets and strings that they use, but it's hard to say. Obviously, the game is very different.
When you guys are designing for rackets, oh God, how do I want to phrase this question? When you're designing for rackets, you have rackets where you go, this is going to really be more for a double specialist. This is going to be for a counter puncher. Do you
Uh,
think about those kind of performances?
yeah, yes, in terms of the style of play and the swing style, swing speed. I think in terms of this is a double specialist racket, that tends to come afterwards. It's like, oh, this is such a great double stick because like when you're in that, it's so solid. It's like that comes later. I'm not, we're not really thinking this is a racket only for doubles players. And I think part of the challenge is we can never build a racket to every individual player, whether they're a singles player or a doubles player. It's people have different sensations when they play. People swing the racket in a different way. We don't have the same sort of like in golf where you go and get fit for golf clubs and you go there and your whole swing is analyzed and the way you impact the ball is analyzed and they change everything. They change your shaft. They change the angle of the lie. They change all sorts of things. That's not really happening at such a high level in tennis. I do believe in custom things. I think it's such a skill to have a good customizer come in and get your racket set up for you. And I think people would enjoy tennis a lot more if they did that because us as engineers, we can put out a racket that it's never intended for an individual because I don't know that individual. We can't build it that way. But if we build a racket that we think is really good, I think that players should go and get them customized and fit to them more. Because that way, you can take a racket that is great as a singles racket and it can be a great doubles racket, but it just depends on how you play. And a good customizer is gonna get that.
That's a good point. I think that's something that a lot of the general public don't realize about. That's all of the pros are having some level of customization, even
Sure.
if it's as simple as their string choices and tension choices.
Of course. I mean,
So
you know better than me, Mitch. You're in that world, but I think it's you could take one of our rackets and have two completely different players, but playing the same racket, and you could set them up in a totally different way. Like the way that racket is weighted and balanced, the string tension, the strings, everything is set up for that player. And having worked with some very talented customizers as an engineer on the side, and I'm like, whoa, that guy, like they can watch him play for 5 minutes and be like, yeah, we need to tweak this, like a couple of grams, in the handle is gonna, and I'm just like, and they get it right, and it's like having that eye to customize is unbelievable, and the enjoyment a player can have from getting that right racket setup is huge.
that's awesome. Right. Well, I think we're on to the silly question part of the interview now.
Yeah.
So I hope you're prepared for this. All right. So let's go over quick some more favorites. Let's go favorite movie or movies of all time.
Oh gosh, that's tough. Who favorite? So obviously, I've got a 6 and a 7-year-old at home right now, and we've been watching a lot of movies. There's been a lot of movie time. I have been going through all of the Marvel movies with my 7-year-old. He absolutely loves them. So I do have a bit of a soft spot for those. They're silly. They're daft. They're not too. I tell you, I get recommendations on movies and TV shows all the time, and I'm just like, I don't have time to sit down, or if it's something that I really have to concentrate on, I have a hard time with it. Obviously, there's some exceptions, but yeah, the Marvel movies are fun with my family. That's what I enjoy.
I'm with you, man. I love them. How about
But
music? Oh,
but
go ahead.
just say I did prefer Infinity Wars over Endgame.
Gotcha.
Big Infinity Wars fan, and Endgame was a little disappointing to me.
Oof.
Yeah,
Controversial.
controversial.
You heard it here first.
Yeah.
How about music? What are you liking for music?
So I did see this question on the other guys. So
You
yeah,
prepared.
Dennis is obviously a huge music guy. I would say, probably music that I like to listen to is obviously influenced by British bands growing up. So I would, I'm a big Oasis fan. I like to throw that on. Some like Stereophonics and stuff. You're a big music guy too, Mitch. So
How
can't
about this one?
really
Stones
much.
or the Beatles?
Well, I grew up on the Beatles because my dad was a big Beatles guy, so I grew up on that. I think, yeah, I think I'd go Beatles, but I
Beatles.
appreciate both.
All right, and I'm going to give you a curveball. I didn't give the other guys. How about favorite beverage?
Ooh, favorite beverage, alcoholic or non-alcoholic?
Your choice.
Um, ooh. So I am partial to, the guys will know I'm partial to soda. So like Coke, like I won't, I like drinking water, but if I'm really feeling it, I'll get Coke. I do like Coke. Um, I like drinking IPAs, and I do like the odd Scotch now and then. So
Very good.
that's more now than then at the moment in isolation. I'll be honest.
I don't think anybody blames you for that.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice. Well, thanks again, Tim, for taking the time
No
to
worries,
chat with
appreciate it.
us today. I mean, it's really a privilege to get to spend some time with all of you guys, but
Yeah,
just to understand the inner workings of things and get to know you guys as
yeah.
people and how important you are to the industry. So,
Well, it's a great industry to be in, and obviously I've had very different experiences in it compared to the other guys you've spoken to already. But I think everybody who's been in it loves it and loves the sport. And we're always happy to talk. Like you said, we could talk all afternoon really if we wanted to do a deep dive into products or even into tennis. But it's been fun. I love doing this stuff.
okay, thanks again, and be well.
Absolutely.